that you could be with me. Now, I want to have a chat about Andrew Bolt. Now, he's a bolt from hell and a pain in the arse, but nevertheless, he says some things which sometimes make sense. But a lot of the time, he says things which are just utter crap. Now, I want to talk today about one of his things that he says it makes sense, and then I'm going to highlight what an idiot he really is. Now, he came out and talked about the ABC's last week, their version of Q&A, and and that they didn't have someone on the panel who could speak to the no vote, except he did have a young Liberal on. They did have one young Liberal on who probably could have talked about the no vote, but he was pretty inconsequential as it turned out. But they did have this British bloke, a journalist, who did make comment that there weren't a wide range of views on this panel. And I agree with him, and I thought it would have been interesting to have had someone come on to talk about the no vote for the Voice, but it didn't happen. And I think one of the reasons for that might be that the audience are often progressive, and that a little bit further left-wing than what a lot of people would like to confront. And so probably they did invite people, maybe they chose not to come on. Who knows the answer to that? But the point was that he was right, that they did have, it was loaded towards those people with the yes vote, apart from the guy from the UK. Now, my point is that I really wanted to highlight the things that he has to say in this clip I'm about to show you in relation to the Voice and the way the Voice can be interpreted based on past experiences. Now, the past experience that he talks about is ATSIC, and how ATSIC was just this way by which people within the Indigenous community could access funds for their projects. And it was a mess. In fact, there's a lot of fraudulent behaviour occurred, a lot of money went missing, and it turned out that they weren't producing anything of great value to their communities. Now, he equates that to, or conflates it with, the fact that the Voice is something that is basically the same and will have the same result. Now, I'll play the clip and then I'll tell you why I think he is just so wrong.
In this ABC report, everything you need to know about the Voice, it's kind of Aboriginal-only advisory parliament, explained why it had to be in the Constitution so that no parliament could ever get rid of it. Now watch this particular part of this video. You are not being told something very important.
Well, you're about to lie to us, buddy.
Very worried.
If the referendum succeeds, the Voice will be enshrined in the Constitution, basically meaning it can't be disbanded or gotten rid of down the track, something that has happened to First Nations bodies in the past.
Now, what I did fail to tell you is that he's criticising what I think is a really balanced view of what the Voice represents. But simply because it's produced by the ABC, then it has to have its failings. And they have a lot of failings, no one will deny that. But this one, I think, given that I've already watched it, and I must, look, I don't necessarily suggest that that I take an unbiased view around many things. There's many things in which I know I filter stuff based on my own biases. And I certainly guess that I've filtered a lot of what the Voice has to say through my own biases. So, but when it comes to this ABC version, I tried to step back a little bit and try to find some fault with it if I could. I found that overall, you know, it was a pretty good presentation. But it's just like Bolt to find something that he needed to criticise, which is exactly what he's done.
Past.
It won't be officially abolished until July, but the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission is already being stripped of its $70 million worth of assets.
What has happened in most cases, a party will appeal to the voters that it will get rid of this XYZ body because it's clear that it's not working. And that's happened I think we reckoned
Now,
7 times.
Now, Bolt thinks that the Voice is an organisation very much like ATSIC. Now, I don't know which land he comes from, but it's not the land of reality, because the Voice is not about that at all. It is completely different structure, different aims, different objectives, but he has it wrong.
It's in our history.
So, from the ABC's presentation, you're invited to believe that terrible populist governments, probably racist, scrapped past Aboriginal bodies like the Voice for no good reason. Bodies that, if you believe Marcia Langton there, should never have been sacked. But what you aren't told is what really happened.
I don't think Marcia Langton said they shouldn't have been sacked. Check on that. I think the place was pretty corrupt and needed to be dispensed with, but it probably needed to be replaced with something else, but never was, hence the Voice.
And why such a body shouldn't be in the Constitution, why governors should be able to sack them. What you were not told is that the only body we've had that comes close to the Voice and was sacked was the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, or AT.
That is totally, I need to say that's totally untrue. The two cannot be conflated together. They're completely different ideas at a completely different time. And he is lying about the relevance of ATSIC in the time that it was created and the problems that it had to the Voice, which is just about recognition within the Constitution. The ATSIC had nothing to do with the Constitution. ATSIC was a body that was delivered a lot of funding to provide services for Indigenous people. It failed in that regard in many ways, I think, but it is not the same. However, Bolt, the great all-knowing, thinks it was.
ATSIC, last led by Jeff Clark, who identifies as Aboriginal. And by the way, Marcia Langton there did work for it. So why was ATSIC scrapped 19 years ago? Well, let me give you some clues. 1, ATSIC was riddled with rotting. For instance,
I don't disagree with
his
that.
wife to Ireland at ATSIC's expense. Clark got his board to agree to pay his private legal expenses after a pub brawl. Clark also refused to pay compensation to a woman who claimed in a civil case.
So I just want to make a point here that this is Bolt presenting the negative view of Indigenous people under this ATSIC banner. And this is disingenuous. It's sad that he finds the need to have to do this. And it's, I think, talking about another period in time, completely unnecessary and totally irrelevant.
To have been raped by him. And Clark still faces hundreds of charges of fraud. Now at ATSIC, a deputy commissioner was convicted of misusing his position, and when he and Clark and a bunch of other men were re-elected to the ATSIC board, Clark said to female voters, "You've given us a mandate. You've returned the traditional role to Aboriginal men." Now that comment might explain why ATSIC was heavily criticised, including by me, for doing next to nothing about shocking rates of domestic violence in some Aboriginal communities. It seemed preoccupied instead with esoteric things like pushing for a treaty, like Labor wants now. In fact, Clark got a former comrade from the former Aboriginal Provisional Government, there's a clue there for you, that he used to help run, to work on constitutional changes instead of something more practical.
So I guess we get the drift. This is the Sky News way of colouring what and excuse that word, but certainly of presenting a version of what they believe the Voice would actually look like. And they're wrong. They are totally wrong. They do not understand the concept to start with. They still argue that it's going to be a third house in Parliament, which is not. That it is simply the recognition of Indigenous people in our Constitution. This other stuff that is throwing at us is a furphy. It's a distraction. I'm trying to think of another analogy. It's a red herring. It has nothing to do with and doesn't relate to the voice as it's being presented at the moment. And like most things that Bolt does, I find absolutely repulsive. And the man needs to find a better way of looking at the world, because the way he looks at it is pretty damn toxic. So if you've got any comments about anything here and you want to talk to me about it, you can email me at the address that I've just put up. And I'd like to think that you could subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notifications and so forth in the future. So thanks for being with me, everybody. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.